All right. What do you say, Francis? Should we go for it? Brilliant. Okay. Well, welcome again. It is a real privilege to be here and for Francis and I to be talking to you all about something we are very, very passionate about. And thank you very much to School Business Manager UK for allowing us to collaborate with them on this session. So a little bit about us before we begin. We are from School Space. We are a social enterprise that has helped hundreds of schools in the UK grow their income and grow their community impact over the last 15 years through school lettings. My name is Mick Channon. I'm a former secondary school teacher and school leader, and I've been supporting schools through School Space for the past 4.5 years. Now, Francis, can I hand it to you?
Thanks, Mick. Hello, everybody. Really lovely to see you this afternoon. My name is Frances Holgeth. I'm Director of Operations here at School Space. I've been with the company for about 6.5 years now, so a nice long chunk. And before this, I worked with the NHS, with FE, with FTSE 250 companies. So a nice broad range of business background, but a real focus on education in recent years.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, so before we dive into a little bit of content, I would love you all, please, to take out a phone and to scan this code. I have checked it and it does work nicely on a phone. So please open that up because it's just a brilliant way to get us interacting together. Let's hear what people think. What is the first word that comes into your head when you think about school lettings? Francis and I are prepared to really help you today with whatever it is, wherever you are on that spectrum. Whether it's a headache or it's real community interest and income for your school, we're looking forward to being able to help you with that. So here's what we're going to be looking at today. We'll look at the current landscape of lettings, how to work out whether or not what you're running is actually profitable. We'll look at ensuring some steps to income, ensuring your income is sustainable, as well as some steps to growth. And then, as I mentioned, we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Okay. So let's begin by acknowledging the state of play for schools. So Francis and I spend a bit of time at conferences with a variety of school leaders, and whenever we are at these conferences, we are reminded again of the pressures that I'm sure you are all too familiar with, that schools are under more financial strain than ever before, that real-term funding is being stretched thinner and thinner, that energy costs remain stubbornly high, and that salary increases aren't always fully covered. In other words, schools are under immense pressure and they're being asked to do much more, often with much less. So in light of that, schools are being forced to innovate to make the books balance. So as many of you already do, there is an opportunity, and you're seeing the opportunity and the importance of using your school estates as a path to helping those books balance. Schools are in need of additional income and to support their core educational mission, and school lettings is one of the ways that they are achieving this. So schools are increasingly seeing that buildings aren't just cost centers, but are actually valuable assets that can not only add to their bottom line, but also begin to benefit their community. So many schools in this country are sitting on estates that have a 6-figure lettings revenue potential, but don't necessarily have the toolbox or the capacity to maximize that in the way that they would want. So there's a lot to consider when hiring out your facilities, not least of which is navigating the evolving regulatory framework from government, which will cover things such as lettings policies, safeguarding protocols, Martin's Law, health and safety, insurance, cover, hire agreements. And while that's not really the focus of today we're looking at profitability and money, I will just say that if you want to arrange a consultation for us to help you work through any of those things, we'd be very, very happy to, and we'll talk about how to do that at the end. So in sum, the current landscape is that lettings offer a vital revenue source for financially pressured schools, but success in lettings requires attention and careful navigation. Okay, now we'd like to just go to a second question for us to take live to the audience, which is this: to what extent do you currently do school lettings? So pick this one as multiple choice, is slightly simpler. Pick what you do. And all right, we've got some dabblers. Anybody else? Tried it before and it didn't work. You're quite possible you're the person who wrote headache earlier. I understand there's some challenges with lettings for sure. Okay.
No expert so far. I'm almost sure that's not true, but by the end of this, you will be.
Let's see if we can change that. Okay, lovely.
Great, thanks, Mick. I'm going to now spend a few minutes talking about profitability, and I think this is particularly key based on those initial responses to the Slido around headache, hassle, etc. Now, as a social enterprise, we are really focused on the positive community impact of school lettings. But again, as Mick said, what we know really matters is, are those community lettings bringing in much needed income for your school? And if they are not, then absolutely they are a headache and a hassle. However, there is definitely a world in which that headache and hassle, A, can be made easier, but B, can also be totally worth it for your school. And I think when we find schools and academies who don't feel that way or can't see that, it's often because they are not clear and are unable to get clear on the profitability and the positive financial impact of running lettings. So as I say, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how you can really clearly see that profitability and the positive impact of lettings, but also discussing the things that can undo all that good work that lettings can do. So just to start off, I want to pull out 3 key things that people often kind of fall into a trap of forgetting about when it comes to the costs and the impact of lettings. Number 1 is the pay of the staff that are working lettings. So if you're paying overtime for people to be on site, then that can cost money. And if your hirers are not covering that cost, you're not going to be profitable. The cost of the kind of admin of doing this, so booking and finance systems, sending out those emails, all of those things, another area people kind of forget to factor that in to how much they're charging and making sure that lettings are profitable. And thirdly, a really key one that we find coming up is energy costs. Now, sometimes this can be a positive, if you're leaving the heating running at low level anyway, so you're not spending money to turn it on and off, having people in over that period, lovely. But if you're spending a lot of money to heat a pool to 37 degrees for a nice little Turtle Tots group, and they're paying £20 an hour, you probably have a problem there, and that is going to come out on the energy line of your budget. Unfortunately, we do find that often schools don't realise that they aren't profitable or not as profitable as they could be. And one of the key reasons for that is that all of the costs associated with lettings are lumped in to the main school budget. So what we always recommend people do, and what we always look at, is a separate P&L for your lettings impact. So what this allows you to do is really understand what are the costs associated with lettings and how does that compare to your total income. So I'm going to talk through a very simplified P&L here, and I would encourage anybody who knows their lettings really well, you can work through this with me or kind of take some notes to go and take this away, because we find that generally for, school leaders, what they're looking at is a large and complex document looking at all the costs associated with schools, and actually pulling this out can be a really useful exercise to see how important lettings are and how impactful they could be. So to start off doing this P&L, we're going to start with total income. Now, it seems obvious, but I think it's an important place to stop and say, this is the amount of money that you are making from lettings total. So when you look at the invoices that you send to your lettings customers, what is the total amount that they are paying you in response to that? And that is the total income that you are generating from lettings. Unfortunately, not the same as your total profit. But that is your starting point. How much are you making? We then want to look at the direct cost associated with running lettings. So these are the things that flex up and down based on the number of lettings that you have directly. So if a letting did not go ahead, if you didn't have any, you wouldn't have any direct costs associated with it. And the most common of these, most obvious, are staffing costs. So how much are you paying per hour for a staff member to be on site so that letting can run? And often, or sometimes, this can be kind of pulled into other people's general pay or overtime. But I would really recommend separating that out and saying, if we didn't have lettings, would this person still be being paid to be on site at this time? And including that pay rate into this direct cost line. The other thing that's really important to consider here is the on cost for these people. So pensions, national insurance, annual leave, etc. All of these things ramp up as people work more and more generally. And therefore, if you are giving people lots of overtime or increasing their hours, you need to consider the increased on costs as well within your direct cost line. The third one is probably lots of people on this call's time, so the management costs. And this is often seen as kind of the hidden cost of lettings, because however hard we try and however good our intentions is, There will always be work associated around making sure lettings can run that are taken by our leaders within school. So this might be your finance team, your HR team, doing marketing, managing scheduling, reporting to governors on the fact that you have lettings. All of these things take up time and take up some of your time to make sure that lettings can run. And there's two real things to think about here. One, how much time are you spending on that, but also the sunk cost. So what else could you be doing while you're running lettings? I think that really underlines how important it is to consider management costs in the cost of lettings as well. So once you've defined those three amounts for you and your school, and particularly the management costs that will be quite unique to you, that's how you get to your profit. So you're looking at your total income, deduct your direct costs, deduct your management costs, and the bit that is left over, the remaining amount of money, that is how much profit you are making from your lettings. Because that's not being spent elsewhere, that is now money for you to play with and spend on whatever you like to positively impact the school. Thanks, Nick. So I wanted to talk through some real life examples because all of that's a bit vague, but let's talk about what this actually looks like for some of our schools. So again, forgive this, if anyone is very experienced in lettings, this is quite simplified, but this is a good example of kind of how this works through. So example one, we have a lovely dance group in on a Tuesday evening. So we're looking at one customer, one night of the week, and they are term time only. So they're only running for 30 weeks of the year. So you need to worry about holidays and all of those things. They have an hourly rate of £40 per hour. What this means is for the whole year, their total income is £2,400. That is how much you're making from this customer. That's what you're invoicing to them. For the staff cost for this booking, including all that on costs, you're paying £25 per hour to staff this booking. You need to staff this booking for 2.5 hours because although the booking is only for 2 hours, you need some time either side to open and close the site. And again, you're paying for this for 30 weeks of the year because this is directly linked to the letting happenings, which is why it's a direct cost. And therefore, the direct costs associated with this letting are £1,875. That is how much you're paying for staff to be on site for that letting. The third cost, a bit more approximate, but let's say this booking takes up about 3 hours of people's time across school every single month. So in this, I'm including like scheduling staff, invoicing, managing any queries, sorting out holiday, all of those bits and pieces that happen over the month. Let's add them all up and say it's 3 hours. And on that, you're looking at approximately £1,000 across the year, just to kind of keep this booking ticking over and making sure that you are ticking all those boxes associated with it. So then to get to our profitability, what we are doing is taking that 2.4K of total income, we're deducting our direct costs and our management costs. And unfortunately for this example, we are ending up with a negative number. So we're ending up with minus £555 to the school. So this booking for a school would not be profitable. But what's important here is that it's likely without separating out these costs, that would be quite unclear within a normal school budget. You wouldn't necessarily see that that wouldn't be a profitable booking. So let's move on to a more positive example. Thanks. So again, for simplicity, we're looking at one night of the year and we're looking at 30 weeks across the year. So some more seasonal bookings. But we now have 3 overlapping groups, which means that our lettings are running from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. What this means is your income has increased from 2.4K to 9.6K. So you've had a massive increase in income there from lettings across the year. And because these bookings are overlapping, your staff costs have only increased to 2.6K, just over. So what that means is you get 7K more income, but your direct staff costs have only increased by £750. Similarly, your management fees have again increased. And in here, we might think about the fact we might have done some marketing work or some sales work to book these new customers in. But we're still only seeing a kind of growth in that cost, about 1.8K versus 7K total income growth. So you've got 2 positives here. You've got 1, you've increased the overall income, but 2, and probably more importantly, you've managed to overlap these bookings, which means the money you're making per hour on the booking has increased. And that has allowed you to become profitable from a lettings perspective. So as you can see at the bottom, we're now making a bit over 4K from these lettings. So another question to you all If you could be much more like example 2 and you could increase the profitability of your lettings, maybe by 50k, as some of our schools do, how would your school spend that money? Nice. If anyone can't get on the Slido, just a reminder, you can still scan the code or log on there. I can see someone typing, that's exciting. Resources for students, yes, brilliant. Nice. That's probably our most common report from our school about what they spend that money on as well. We've also had murals, balancing the books, getting rid of your deficit, making sure that's there, and particularly with profitability, making sure that it is not damaging the balancing of your books. Estates maintenance, wear and tear, keeping things up. If you're sustainability conscious, LED lights, all of those things, free school lunches, a brilliant one. One of our schools managed to cover free school lunches for all of their students via lettings income, or profit, I should say. That was really positive.
We got one more.
One more person typing.
Well, no pressure, person typing. People typing, very good. Okay. Let's see. We'll let those two come in. Oh no. Did we scare them away?
I think we might have done. Oh, wow.
Very nice.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Francis. Right, let's talk a bit about retention. So let's look at how we can protect the income that we already have and create conditions within a school to let that income stay and grow. So too often, schools lose money or don't make a profit, not because the demand isn't there, but because internal events displace existing hirers. So as an example, something you could do to avoid that is one of our schools used to cancel thousands of pounds worth of lettings multiple times a year because of their parents' evening taking place in the main hall. So all they did was say, we want to prioritize keeping that money in, was they moved those lettings from the main hall to the sixth form common room, and that protected the income without compromising the school's needs. It's a very small operational change, but had a huge financial impact for the school. Now, of course, there'll be times when clashes can't necessarily be avoided. The key here, like exam periods, for example, the key here is proactive communication with customers. So get exam calendars early, understand which spaces are going to be out of action, and build those periods into your annual projections, and communicate that with the hirers well ahead of time so that they aren't surprised by any changes, and that building up of trust keeps customers coming back. And that leads me nicely to my second point, which is keeping customers happy. Hirer satisfaction is a really strong indicator of long-term income and of income growth. And when people and customers feel looked after, they become promoters. They stay year after year, they recommend you to others, and they help to build the reputation that your school wants in the community. And really, the wheel does not need to be reinvented here. Simple things make a huge difference for customers. Things like having clear contact details, answering the phones, having clear hiring agreements, responding quickly to queries, understanding their needs, showing flexibility when necessary. All of those things really help with customer retention. And another thing we often think about internally is how important the whole school buy-in is to keeping income at a school high. So when teachers understand that lettings income is actually being reinvested into them, like some of the things we've just said, so into their estates, into resources for their children, into upgrading the AstroTurf, then they begin to see that actually lettings aren't a disruption, but they're part of school life, and they start seeing them as a benefit. And that cultural shift inside the school is one of the most powerful tools that you have to ensure that even through the highs and the lows of lettings, the customers are happy that they stay at the school and that they continue to give money to the school. The flip side of that, just to give you an illustration, is that the PE teachers or the department or the class teacher gets the hump with lettings, and they just say, no, the sports hall can't be used. No, my classroom can't be used. And although that might solve an immediate issue for them, actually that means that there might be fewer resources and less ability for the school to make the books balance. So whole school buy-in is incredibly important. Next, I'd like to talk about scheduling. This is not a glamorous topic to talk about, but as Francis indicated earlier, it does in fact save money and can move the needle from unprofitable to profitable for you as a school. So as an example, we once worked with a school that had 2 hirers in 2 separate buildings at the same time. And simply by moving them into the same building, they cut not only their staffing costs, but of course their utility rate, their utility bills as well, moving them into a much more profitable situation. And finally, we need to talk about pricing, and schools have to be intentional about pricing. You may or may not believe this, but last year we took on a school that hadn't had a price increase in 17 years. That means people were paying less than the minimum wage in the country to use a space for an hour. So as soon as they put a single staff member on, they were making a loss. We would recommend that you do regular pricing reviews to ensure that rates reflect demand, reflect competition, and reflect the value of your facilities. And then when you start to apply discounts on that, you're doing that thoughtfully rather than reactively. And that means you can start to fill quieter periods without undermining the overall revenue. So when you put all of this together, that's protecting income, keeping hirers happy, scheduling smartly, reviewing pricing, you are laying the groundwork for a profitable lettings program that will add value to your school. And Francis, I'll hand back to you.
Nice, thank you. Some of you might be sat here thinking they are talking about lettings as if I have some already, or they, mix talking about retaining lettings while we've barely got any to start off with, or thinking about that example 1 and thinking that is much more similar to my school than example 2. So we did also want to touch on some ways in which you can grow lettings. And obviously a key thing about growing lettings is they are more likely to be more profitable. And there is some overlap here with what Mick just discussed around retention. Good practice in lettings helps you retain customers, but also helps you grow them as well. So to start off with, there are just some 3 kind of simple questions that you can ask yourself that might kind of take you to the next level in terms of growing your lettings. So number 1, do you have a letting section on your website? Is it obvious to people that you run lettings in their school? If someone tried to look up your school and lettings, what would they find? What is the barrier to entry to them getting in there in terms of finding who to contact, what space are available, how much do they cost, and all of those things. The other thing is about how attractive you are to groups. So have you thought about, or do you publicise potentially what equipment you have available, what line markings there are, even what size your chairs are? Sounds silly, but the number of times people will turn up to a primary school and expect adult chairs can be a challenge. But publicising these things or making them easily available. If you don't have equipment at the school, or you don't want that to be used by your hirers, fair play, but then you should have storage available. That's going to really increase the number of lettings that you can have in school, because people are going to be able to bring their equipment and leave it there rather than having to cart it backwards and forwards. So that really helps with growth and with new sales in particular. Also thinking about, are your lettings hours attractive? If you're just opening from 9 till 10 p.m, maybe not. Or you're only opening one weekend day. Weekends are a massive time for lettings. So it's really important to think about how are you making yourself available to your community. As Mick said as well, being easily contactable, really important. Allowing viewings, responding quickly to inquiries, really, really matters. I think what we'd really recommend here is put yourself in the shoes of the potential hirer that doesn't know your school. So we all know our schools really well, right? We know who to contact, we know what space look like. If you didn't, think about it and work through what would be their journey to try and hire your space and try and remove as many barriers to entry as possible. And one thing that's really worth remembering is the most positive, or the best type of marketing, is positive word of mouth due to positive experiences. So just on to the next slide, please, Mick. Once you kind of got that first entry right, there are a few more things or kind of zero cost marketing tips that you can think about to, again, really help you to grow your lettings. So I've said online visibility on your website, but also think about social media. Do you have a Twitter account? Do you have an Instagram account associated with school? Absolutely be posting about lettings on there. And if you already have hirers and they have social media, be posting on their accounts as well. Ask them to shout about how amazing the spaces are that you are using. Using your school network. All of your parents and carers associated with school are all potential hirers. So really remember that. So sharing it when you have open evenings, in terms of you're sending out comms to your school community, make sure that includes using like the fact that lettings are available as well. It's a great way to start building up your lettings community. Talking about social media, local Facebook groups, these are an absolute minefield for our outbound sales team. And that is where everyone is talking about what they're doing kind of across your community. It's a really great way to find groups and a really great way that they will find you as well. So get on Facebook and start shouting about the fact that you have some great spaces. Local connections, so beyond your immediate school community. Again, this might sound old school, but we know that lettings are hyper-local. So things like notice boards in supermarkets, word of mouth from staff, making sure your staff are bought into lettings and they're telling people about it. Leaflet drops, is that something you're interested in, or doing a more online campaign as well? All really, really good options. And finally, making sure you've got good quality photos of your spaces. This doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. Find potentially one of your students that's really savvy with that, or one of your staff members has the best iPhone, and go and walk around and make sure you've got some really good pictures of your spaces, and think about how you're presenting them. So tidy up the chairs, make sure there's no rubbish there, all of these things that can seem simple, but when you're trying to do a million other things that aren't as obvious as they could be. And all of these things will help you kind of make people more likely to use your spaces and boost that income and that profitability as well. Nice. So that is all from us in terms of slides. We're now going to move on to the Q&A. Mick, have you got any prompts you want to share here?
So we've got a couple of questions that have come in that we will start with. But if you scan that code again, it should take you to the same page if you've closed it on the Slido. And it just gives you a chance to ask some questions as we go. The code is still there. We'll just start with these two that have come in. It looks like number 2 is a bit of a shorter answer, and number 1 a slightly longer one. Francis, where would you like to start?
Should I do insurance first? So that depends on you and your school and the risk you'd like to take, I say. So for us, as an outsource provider, we require all of our customers to have public liability insurance of 5 million or more. That is what we would recommend you do. You can have them covered by insurance if you have told your insurance company about this and if you are willing to take that risk. So it's just really worth thinking about what risk you're willing to take, how well you know that insurer, and how well that customer as well. And one thing we would recommend in addition to insurance is also taking deposits from all your customers as well. So if there is anything more minor that needs to be picked up, you can cover that by a deposit also. Do you have any examples of schools that really crack lettings? Loads. Nick, do you want to take that one or shall I?
I'm happy to start with it. I wish this was more of an interaction because I'd like to know if they mean from our portfolio of schools or schools, schools that we have interacted with. I think the answer is actually linked to that. I would say the schools that have really cracked lettings are the schools that have invested in the capacity to crack lettings. And Francis has touched on some of it. It's sales, it's marketing, it's a finance team, it's staying on top of bad debt, it's staying on top of profit and loss, it's managing the staffing team on the ground. Now, that's a significant amount of capacity, which is why people like us think about lettings all the time and helping schools maximize it. So I can think of, to be honest, it's a very small number of schools we've spoken to who say to me genuinely, actually, we're doing just fine. Like lettings isn't a problem. Most schools we talk to have not cracked lettings at all, which is why they come to us for the capacity on all those different things that I've spoken about. So I think it is a capacity question. And so if whoever's asked that for you and your school, I think that the secret sauce is who is doing each of those things to not just make sure money comes on the top, but that it stays, that it grows, that it's compliant, that it is all of the things to make lettings a success. Francis, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I'd say the other thing to kind of help you crack lettings is to really consider or to hold the two aspects of lettings really clear. And what I mean by this is the community impact and the income generation. This is something that we talk about a lot. We have a number of stakeholders and making sure that we are doing that right and being really clear internally when you're making decisions that income generation is community impact as well. So if you are subsidising lettings because you are letting this lovely community group use your space for £10 an hour, that is negative for your whole school community. So really making sure that you are thinking about the profitability and the commerciality of the side of lettings like that. And I guess that links a little bit to how to make sure we're not just losing money, which is a really important one. So the first thing I do is I would do a P&L for your lettings to find out where you are at, like first and foremost. Some other things to kind of really consider with that as well, having a minimum spend, again, may seem really obvious, but figuring out how much do you need to make per hour to make sure you're not losing money, and putting that in place with all of your customers. So saying you cannot book this space unless it's a minimum spend of, say, £40 per hour. And that's a really key way to easily make sure that you're not losing money on any of your lettings. Thinking smartly about your staffing is another really important one as well. And overlapping bookings, that's going to be really beneficial. If you have 3 bookings paying for one staff member, that's really going to help you. And of course, making sure your invoices are being paid as well. Should I talk about? Go on.
I'll just add to the staffing side of things. You may find that it is much more financially profitable for you as a school to not rely on your site team, but to specifically hire in the community for someone whose job is on a much lower wage than your site team's overtime, which could be 40, 50, 60 pound an hour on Saturday and Sunday. Just hire for a community lettings assistant who gets the living wage, who's employed locally, and that is what they do. And I think that is a way to keep, like Francis said, makes minimum spend more reasonable, rather than saying it has to be £70 an hour or we make a loss. So that's something to consider, that you maybe don't have someone who is that at the moment and you rely on your site team. A way to make more from lettings might be to say, well, let's just hire someone who does that only.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Meg. It makes a huge difference whether that staff spend that direct cost is £20, £25 an hour, or 20 or 15, for example. Yeah. Safeguarding. Yeah, brilliant question. Really key, and I know we mentioned we kind of didn't touch on policies and coverage in this, but we can talk more to it. So just to speak on safeguarding, so we're saying there's a whole section of KITSI that talks about lettings, and there's also a document called out of school settings, which also governs kind of how safeguarding should be managed with lettings. So for more kind of in-depth advice on working, go to there, and there's even checklists there of what should be in your like lettings customer safeguarding policies. It's quite detailed in there, so that's what we're saying. The main thing around safeguarding when lettings are occurring is that the school during lettings hours moves from being a school, so a closed space, to an open venue, much more like a leisure centre. And therefore, in that situation, you need to think about a few things. One, you need to make sure that your students are being looked after as if lettings are happening. So you are aware of the fact that there are other groups on site, and therefore your students shouldn't be kind of wandering around site like they might be during the school day. You make sure that all of your lettings customers understand their responsibility for safeguarding. So you have a safeguarding policy for them. They have kind of read your safeguarding statement, and they are aware that they are responsible for the safeguarding of their own attendees while on site. And then also making sure that your staff, so the people that are on site with your lettings, are trained there as well, and that your DSL knows that you have lettings going on. There is a very clear reporting system for both customers and your staff if they do see anything that's concerning during lettings hours. So safeguarding is kind of paramount to what we do, and it's just making sure that that has been considered, particularly by your DSL, to understand what should be happening out of hours, and that your customers know what they're doing as well.
That's great. I think we've covered everything. So we've done profitability question here, insurance, schools who've cracked it, and then safeguarding. Okay, nice. Great stuff. Well, guys, we just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today. We know that having the time to do something like this is hard to come by. So thank you very much for carving out some of your afternoon to spend it with us. If you benefit from further support, what we'll do is a couple things. So we'll be sending out a free resource following this webinar. It's what we call our School Space Checklist for Success. It's really just a way for you to sort of sit with something concrete in front of you and say, is lettings profitable? Is it working for us? We will also be offering free one-to-one consultations. So if you'd like to book one of those in, please just scan that. That will take you to a place just to book in with me, where I'll happily sit with you and talk through your school and your needs and how lettings could be a success for you. or at any point, please feel free to email us at info, that's info, at school-space.org for more information. So info at school-space.org for more information. And then finally, I just want to again say thank you very much to School Business Manager UK for collaborating with us on this session. And thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and thank you so much, School Business Manager UK. Have a lovely afternoon.
In what's otherwise just us talking to you.